how do I get 10% better as a grappler? Is it me showing up to class every day more? Is it like, where are you at in your journey? Like, there's going to be some people that are going to look at their ability, and technically they are just dialed, dude. They're just like, they understand. They've watched every BJJ Fanatics video. They're here, but physically they're here. You may actually be better off taking 2 days of jiu-jitsu off a week and focus on strength conditioning. And you actually might get more bang for your buck overall as an athlete than you would if you just continued on the same path you're on. If you think about the way you train, you want to hit different energy systems and different ranges of motion. So if you, in a given week, Paul, like if you never hang from a bar, we got to have you hang from a bar once a week. So it'll open your shoulders because you're probably internally rotated from grappling. So we're trying to get wide variety. Yeah, you're trying to build yourself up into, like, let's just say like Wolverine, right? And so you start saying to yourself, okay, well, where are my gaps? On my grappling, I grapple for 5 to 7 minute rounds, maybe 10-minute rounds, whatever, right? They're generally like an aerobic effort, not like this short burst. They're more of like technical. Well, right. How do I fill in the gaps? Well, maybe I need to go long, slow distance training. Maybe I need to go out for like an hour at zone 2. Maybe I need to go at high intensity for 30 seconds or a minute. And so I think getting those different ranges will help build the overall athlete.
What is going on? Welcome back to Jiu-Jitsu Outlet. I'm here today with a freaking legend in the CrossFit community, also becoming a legend in the freaking Jiu-Jitsu community ever since you got your Jiu-Jitsu brown belt now, dude. That's awesome. Mr. Jason Khalipa, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call myself a legend in the jiu-jitsu space, but I appreciate that. No, I definitely, competed for a long time in CrossFit, did a lot of things there, but love jiu-jitsu, fired up to chat about it.
Dude, well, you won the CrossFit Games. You're one of the, I'd say, more well-known influencers in CrossFit. I've started following you back in the day when you first did an interview on Barbell Shrugged.
Oh, okay.
I don't know when that was, but back in the day. So I'm stoked to have you here, man. I've been stoked to talk to you ever since I saw that you've been into jiu-jitsu. So I want to talk about CrossFit and how that compares to jiu-jitsu. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask you the question that we start off every episode of the show of, which is, how has training in jiu-jitsu helped your mental health since you started?
I mean, dude, it's, I think fitness in general, I think obviously if you're a jiu-jitsu practitioner, you're going to favor jiu-jitsu. But I think any intentional exposure to adversity, I think is a good thing for you. So, if you have micro dose of adversity in the gym for your kids, whatever that might be, it makes real life adversity easier to overcome. And I think that any physical endeavor has some form of physical, adversity. But jiu-jitsu is very unique for that. Someone's got you in a, like yesterday, for example, someone had me in basically like a body triangle, and you're just sitting there, or, I kind of gave up different positions. So I wanted to work from there, and you're just sitting there. You're just like, man, this sucks. But having to fight through it and not tap, in situations like that, obviously if you're getting a submission or whatever, but it's like that fight, that nonstop battle, it does more for your mindset than it does for anything else, because it just translates to off the mats. If you're able to get through an extra 10 seconds before the round ends, what else are you able to take that into in your real life that has direct application?
I love what you said about microdosing, overcoming adversity in the gym, how you can kind of get into this controlled space where you can practice getting these reps in of doing something very difficult that you usually wouldn't do in most times in your life. Like, you don't encounter that going grocery shopping unless it's grocery shopping gone wrong or something like that.
Yeah. I think physical exposure is the best way that you can kind of control the adversity, right? Like for example, life is going to come and rock you. But I think the ability to use physical stuff to help you develop mindsets of positive self-talk, understand what's in your control, battling back, all those things I think translate really well to off the mats.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. Let me ask you this. How do you feel like training in martial arts has helped you off the mats in your career or maybe in your role as a father?
Well, first off, I think self-defense is critical. I actually I got 3 boys in my house right now. Only one of them is my son. We just got done playing baseball, like I was telling you, but we're going to be headed to the shooting range. And then when we come back, I'm going to work some, some like basic takedowns with them. And I just think that as a young boy, even as a grown man, I think developing your self-confidence, by exposing yourself to hand-to-hand combat, I think is really powerful. I think that the biggest bullies I ever found in high school were the people that weren't self-confident. And when that lack of self-confidence came together, that was when they started to bully people. And I refused to have my son be that person. And so I want to expose him to hard things, in particular, grappling and martial arts, because I think that they allow you to have confidence where you could approach situations in a calm and cool manner and never be the kid ever who bullies somebody else. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree, man. And you're never going to let anyone push you around, either verbally or emotionally or anything like that. You learn how to stick up for yourself in your relationships, at work, and all these other places where maybe someone might push you around. Like, something I think about is if you have your kids trained in martial arts, they're not going to let their partner push them around. They're not going to get into an abusive relationship someday where the other person's like abusing them or speaking down to them. They're just not going to tolerate that kind of stuff, because they're going to have that confidence to know that, it's not okay for someone to talk to me like this.
Yeah.
Stuff like
and as you know, man, there's always someone bigger, stronger, faster. It's like you could roll. I've had the blessing to be able to roll with a lot of like really top level jiu-jitsu athletes. And you might think you're like pretty good at jiu-jitsu, but there's levels to the game. And when you get humbled, it's a very important life lesson, especially for young men and men as they get older, to be humbled, to realize like you might not be as tough as you think you are, and to, earn it every day to get stronger, more self-confident. And then I feel like when you get to that point, you just become like this really gentle, compassionate individual who also has the ability, if necessary, to utilize violence. And I think that it's a really good place to be over time, because, that's what I want for my son. I want him to be the most compassionate, loving individual in the room, but also the same one that could defend himself and defend others.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's almost like you become a more peaceful version of yourself, even though you become way more deadly. It's kind of this weird dichotomy if you think about it.
Yeah, 100%. And then obviously for girls, I think it's the opposite. So, for example, when I work with, not the opposite, I shouldn't say, when I work with my son, it's more about establishing control, right? Like, hey, over time, you're going to become a pretty big person. I want you to be able to control somebody else if needed without having to inflict damage, like striking. Now, if you need to strike, let's teach you how to strike. But if we could just have you control somebody, I think that's really great. With my daughter, it's pretty much the opposite. I don't really want her to, she's not going to be able to hold you inside control. She's just not. And so instead, I'd rather have her learn how to create distance and get away, run. And so those are the different types of skills we utilize from a self-defense perspective, based on reality and based on body size.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. You got to put reality into the mix.
Yeah. I mean, I could teach her to, hold a mount position or side control or maybe an arm bar from the mount. But the reality of her being able to inflict, establish that on somebody with the amount of training that she's doing, it's tough. So I think right now what I'm focused on, again, she's only 13, is just being able to create distance and get away.
Yeah. And that'll aid her, as she grows and gets bigger too, because she'll have that's just good grappling, in my opinion, is creating space and making room to get away, make room to stand back up. People joke about it, but honestly, that's a lot of times the best advice is just stand up.
Yeah.
Don't be on your back so much. Try to stand up, get away.
Like, break grips, right? Like I'll grab her wrist, I'll get behind her and try and grab her by the waist. And how do you get out of that position and then create distance and run? So yeah, I think that martial arts, I think fitness in general provides superpowers for people. I really believe this. And I think that, if people are not exposing themselves to hard things, I think they're just missing out on the ability in between the ears to really reach their potential.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because that's something I talk about a lot too. And it's funny how when you start talking about the word superpowers, people almost like smirk at you a little bit. They're like, oh no, you're no, man, like not superpowers. It's like, dude, maybe you just haven't been training long enough. but you gotta, I don't know, how would you define a superpower in terms of especially fitness or martial arts?
Well, I mean, if you think about like superpower in terms of like Batman or Superman or whatever you want to call it, right? They have something unique to the other individuals. Use Superman, his ability to fly, and I mean, he could do all kinds of crazy stuff, right? Or they
Yeah.
have the Hulk who could grow to whatever. Obviously, when I say superpower, I am not I am not correlating your ability to roll jiu-jitsu to being able to fly, right? But what I am saying is that compared to most people, most of the time in daily situations, if you're intentionally exposing yourself to adversity on the mats in the gym, it gives you a set of skills that other people just don't have, which I would refer to as a superpower because it's
Yeah.
more than what other people have. And that's being established by day in and day out, grinding it, doing hard stuff. And I think that it allows you to, when I use the word superpower, what it really allows you to do is approach situations with more calm, approach situations more calculated, and be the best version of yourself. And I have seen firsthand the correlation between the lessons you could develop, on the gym in the mats with how they imply outside in real life. I mean, I've gone through adversity just like many people have, and those life lessons have given me superpowers when approaching it in real life.
Yeah, the mental side of it. It turns you into almost a more evolved version of yourself.
That's
If you think
exactly.
about it.
Yeah.
Or maybe a more developed version of yourself, if you think about it. And my favorite philosopher, Eliphas Levi, his definition of a superpower is something that is outside of the reach of the common human. And that's basically what you were just saying was, compared to the common person who doesn't train, it looks like a superpower. And it really is. It's outside of what we would consider natural.
That's right. That's a great way to describe it. And I think that, if you're not inspired, I always talk about this, but it's like, look, people know that if they hit CrossFit or hit Jiu-Jitsu, they'll probably lose some weight, maybe. They'll probably get better blood markers, in particular if you're doing strength conditioning. But it's in between the ears that really matters. And I think that if you're rocking jiu-jitsu and you're not doing strength conditioning, and if you're doing CrossFit or strength conditioning and you're not doing jiu-jitsu, I just think you're missing out. You're missing out on the overall superhuman abilities you can create, because I think grappling teaches you so much. I'm a huge fan, obviously, but you never really incorporate an external load. You're never really getting to reach your potential in strength conditioning. You're not. You're reaching your potential as a technique, but over time in jiu-jitsu, the better you get, the less you have to be conditioned, like because you're learning how to manipulate positions better. And I think that if you incorporate both, that's really where that apex is, where that connection between strength conditioning and jiu-jitsu. Now you're really rocking.
That's a great way to put it. And incorporating more strength and conditioning has really helped my jiu-jitsu a lot, especially in the last year, really, when I started to kind of take it a bit more seriously. And it takes so much time. I think that's the thing that people don't understand about fitness. And I'm sure you can put some thought into this better than I could. It just takes a very long time of consistent effort. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, how do you feel CrossFit and Jiu-Jitsu are similar in the discipline? How do you feel like they might be different?
Well, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. They both take time, right? So, in jiu-jitsu, if you want to learn new skills, it's one thing to learn it. Like you could learn an arm bar, but then your ability to navigate to that position, however you get there, and then to actually be able to execute it, and then to be able to execute it against a partner that's not giving it to you is a whole different ball game. It's the same thing in CrossFit. It just takes time. It takes time to get stronger, fitter, faster, etc. I'd say it takes less time. Like if you're looking for immediate results, I actually think you get more. I think it's easier to stick with CrossFit than it probably is for Jiu-Jitsu, because it takes about, I'd say, 6 months for you to kind of understand Jiu-Jitsu. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but like give or take 6 months, like whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
In
I'd say so.
CrossFit, yeah, in CrossFit, I think like after a workout or two, you start feeling a little bit sore. Maybe after like a month, you start maybe seeing your clothes are feeling a little bit better. You're like, wow, you get a little bit more inspired. So I do think there's some parallels in that they both have a high barrier to entry, but I would say that jiu-jitsu is a little bit harder to stick with because it's just a grind, especially when you have another person that's trying to impose their position on you. But, I think for anybody listening who's not doing both, I'd encourage you just to think about it this way. time is of the essence, and grappling takes time to develop the technique. But if 3 days a week for 45 minutes or an hour, you could dedicate yourself to strength conditioning in addition to jiu-jitsu, I think you'd do really well. And I think you got to ask yourself as a jiu-jitsu artist, how do I get 10% better as a grappler? Is it me showing up to class every day more? Is it like, where are you at in your journey? Like, there's going to be some people that are going to look at their ability, and technically they are just dialed, dude. They're just like, they understand. They've watched every BJJ Fanatics video. They're here, but physically they're here. You may actually be better off taking 2 days of jiu-jitsu off a week and focus on strength conditioning. And you actually might get more bang for your buck overall as an athlete than you would if you just continued on the same path you're on. And so I'd encourage everybody listening to be like, all right, let me do a self-evaluation. Here's my martial arts. Here's my fitness. Which one is holding me back from reaching the next level? And obviously the answer is going to be a combination of both, but then you can start kind of tweaking back and forth.
Yeah, I think it's essential, or else your joints are just going to fall apart and you're going to feel like crap all the time. And at the end of the day, you're going to lose to all the people who are doing their proper strength and conditioning and their proper nutrition. It's just like if you're smoking cigarettes, it's like, it's just not going to work out as well for you. Like, sure, you can train jiu-jitsu and do cigarettes, but you're going to lose to the guy who's training jiu-jitsu and not smoking cigarettes and working out.
Yeah. I was on the Simple Man podcast with Nicky Rod and the guys, and I kind of went over strength conditioning for anybody who wants to check that one out. And I went over like the exact format, but in a nutshell, if you're not hitting fives, threes, some tempo training, like slow, if you're not hitting the big macro lifts, the back squat, the deadlift, the press, if you're not hitting those on a regular basis and exposing your body to it, I think you're missing out on some superpowers. If you're not doing 12 to 20 minute high intensity efforts with combining movements, I think you're also missing out. Especially if you want to be a high-end competitor, I think it gets harder and harder to get into the red when you're like the best guy at your gym. But when you get off the mats, it's really easy to get into the red. You start doing burpees and assault bike and whatever. And I think getting into the red off the mats will help you on the mats.
Let me ask you about recovery, because that's usually where I get into trouble. And I know that's where a lot of jiu-jitsu guys get into trouble. So we love training. Sometimes, especially if we're in a camp, we're training 2 or 3 times a day just on technique. So then recovery becomes a big deal. And for me, man, I found it hard, honestly, to recover if I'm lifting more than once a week. So right now I'm finding like I lift really heavy once a week, and I might have another day where I do like a little bit of bodybuilding. But other than that, I feel like I just can't recover. I'd love to train more though. Like if it was possible, like, do you have any tips on recovery, especially for guys who are like over 30?
Yeah. I mean, I would say you got to adjust the RPE, meaning rate of perceived exertion. So yesterday, for example, I went onto the mats, and I'd say my rolling session was a 6 out of 10, right? Like it was good, but it wasn't like the craziest rolls I've ever had. I think I did 4 7-minute rounds, with some guys that, it was fine. It was like, but then there's other days where I might go on the mats and I'm at like a 9 or a 10 because it's just like monsters on the mats. We're going for 10 rounds, whatever. And I think it's important to regulate your intensity. So yesterday, for example, I did that, but I also did a strength conditioning workout the same day. And on the strength conditioning, I ramped it up. So I had like a 6 on the mats, but I had like a 9 off the mats. And I think what's important during the week is to look at it, and you don't want 10s on everything all the time. I think you could have a 6, you could have a 9, you could have a 7, you could have a 5. And what it does is it just gives your body exposure to these different things. So let's just say if you do 1 day of weight training a week, you're probably going pretty hard, getting pretty sore. Maybe you back that off by 10, 20%, and you'd be better off from a recovery perspective, hitting that. And then maybe 3 days later, hitting something else. It's just something that you have to adjust based on your own body, but listening to it, like you'd probably get more, like, I'll give you an example. Would you recommend for someone to do jiu-jitsu once a week, hella hard, or 2 or 3 days a week at 70% effort?
Yeah, definitely the 2 or 3. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So the idea would be, and again, this is all personal preference. There's a bunch of this is like a whole like 5-hour conversation in itself, but at a high level, exposure and creates some type of adaptation, right? So typically you want some type of intensity where your body starts saying, holy crap, that was really difficult. And it starts to create adaptation towards that. But exposure also creates adaptation. For example, if you're sitting there just drilling and drilling and drilling a heel hook, eventually you're going to be able to, you're developing exposure. And now all of a sudden it creates an adaptation in your body and it connects your brain with your body. Same thing can be said about weight training, where a little bit different, but the idea is if you're getting exposure to moderate loads, long ranges of motion, your muscle starts to break down a little bit. It starts to rebuild, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and you start creating adaptation. But if you're exposing yourself 2 or 3 days a week, I think that's really where the money's at.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So you're saying maybe tone down that heavy lifting, go like 70% that day instead of 100.
Well, I mean,
and then again 2 or 3 days later.
Well, I'd also have to ask you, like, how do you feel the next day or the day after that training session? Do you feel pretty sore and beat up from it?
No, I feel great. It's just like if I do another one at that same intensity, then I feel
well.
shitty.
Then maybe if you feel great, then hit the first one with the same intensity. If you feel great, and then maybe 2 or 3 days later, hit a, maybe you hit just a upper body, maybe you just hit 5x5 bench with tempo, slow down, fast up, and you're just getting exposure on the muscles, right? And then maybe after that, maybe after your training session's done, you recover and maybe you hit, 5 rounds of, 1 minute intervals on the assault bike, right? Just to really hit these different energy systems, right? So if you think about your body, you have an anaerobic and aerobic energy systems. And essentially aerobic is your body utilizing oxygen to create energy, and anaerobic is not, in a nutshell. And you can have these glycolytic and oxidative and phosphocreatine. There's different energy systems. If you think about the way you train, you want to hit different energy systems and different ranges of motion. So if you, in a given week, Paul, like if you never hang from a bar, we got to have you hang from a bar once a week. So it'll open your shoulders because you're probably internally rotated from grappling. So we're trying to get wide variety.
Okay. So a little bit more like a technique and speed day.
Exactly.
Sort of stuff. Okay.
Yeah. You're trying to build yourself up into, like, let's just say like Wolverine, right? And so you start saying to yourself, okay, well, where are my gaps? On my grappling, I grapple for 5 to 7 minute rounds, maybe 10-minute rounds, whatever, right? They're generally like an aerobic effort, not like this short burst. They're more of like technical. Well, How do I fill in the gaps? Well, maybe I need to go long, slow distance training. Maybe I need to go out for like an hour at zone 2. Maybe I need to go at high intensity for 30 seconds or a minute. And so I think getting those different ranges will help build the overall athlete.
Okay. That was one other question I had that I wanted to ask you. Is there's been a lot of conversation in the jiu-jitsu world about the zone 2 cardio. And for people that don't know, the way I understand it is that basically means like conversational pace, where your heart rate is elevated, but you're not sprinting. You're not like panting. You know what I mean? You're not breathing too hard. So swimming, long bike, long runs. So if you were programming for a jiu-jitsu athlete, let's say it's someone like me, maybe over 30, and you were going to have them do 2 or 3 days a week, would the zone 2 stuff be kind of in addition to that? Or would that be one of those 2 or 3 sessions?
Yeah, I look at the zone 2 almost as more of like a recovery day, right? Like long, slow distance training, maybe a ruck, maybe a bike ride. If I only had 2 or 3 days with you, what do you weigh? I can't tell how tall you are. So
about 180.
180. Okay. Yeah. So you're 180. How tall are you?
About 6 foot.
Yeah. So 180, 6 foot. So you have like a decent frame, but you're not like the biggest guy in the room, but you're definitely not small, right? You have a decent frame. I'd start looking at you and I'd start saying, okay, what is holding him back in his grappling? Do you need to focus a little bit more on strength, or do you need to focus a little bit more on conditioning? Can he feel like he can keep the pace that he wants the entire match? Or does he, feel the conditioning comes into play? And how can I teach him how to breathe effectively? So there's a lot of things I think that we could do better in jiu-jitsu. One of them is teaching athletes how to breathe effectively. And, the best way that I found to do that is called a burpee test. And so what it is, and you'd be able to do it. You're fit. 15 burpees every minute on the minute for 10 minutes. And the reason why that's important is that it teaches you how to keep your heart rate under control. So what'll happen is minute 1's going to be hella easy. 15, you're going to do it like in 40 seconds, no big deal. Then second, no big deal. Third starts kicking, you're like, And then minute 4 if you don't pace effectively, you're going to hit red line and you're going to break down. But if I then come with you, I'm like, hey, bro, just follow my cadence and listen to me breathe, like swimming, right? Finding a cadence so your heart rate doesn't ever spike. That's something we could teach you off the mats that then translates to on the mats.
Man, that's brilliant. Well, I'm going to try that, man. I'm going to try that. Thanks so much for breaking that down. I
have so
appreciate
many
it.
things to say on this, right? I'm very passionate about improving strength conditioning for jiu-jitsu athletes. We're going to be rolling out some more stuff. I have an app called Train Hard, and we're going to be rolling out some more stuff specifically for grapplers and jiu-jitsu athletes, just because I've been in the space for a long time, and I think that we need to bring more knowledge to it. But I would say I just want to make sure I answered your question effectively. Instead of zone 2 for a guy like you, I would probably incorporate some type of external load. If I had to decide, if I had to choose, I would say, because when you add an external load like a sandbag, a kettlebell, a barbell, I think it'll make you less fragile in terms of your joint strength. I think it'll increase your ranges of motion. And I think it'll make your, basically muscle strength, contractile potential better, which I think will help your jiu-jitsu more than you going out for a, hour-long jog.
So you're saying carrying a sandbag around, or like doing like 5 sets of 5 with it?
Yeah, I'm talking about like putting in a front rack and doing nice slow tempo, just feeling your body get stronger. I know it sounds fluffy, but if people are not exposing themselves, if you're a grappler and you're not lifting any weights at all, dude, I'm telling you, you could just look at a weight the right way and it'll make you stronger, right? Like, because you know what I'm saying? Anyways, I think that if you're not lifting any type of weight, that's a great place to start.
I love it, man. Well, thank you, dude. And I know that we got to wrap this up, but I had one more question for you related to mental health and just kind of your life off the mats and stuff. So obviously you've competed at kind of the peak of CrossFit. You won the CrossFit Games. And you've been a high level athlete for some time. Can you talk to us about like what happened for you mentally when you went through that? You rode that high from winning the CrossFit Games and stuff like that. Like, how did I guess your view of yourself change as you became successful?
Well, man, I think you got to identify why you're training in the first place, right? So, you win the CrossFit Games, you make some money. I competed professionally for 10 years, but it doesn't define who I am. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a business owner. And the reason why I train is that I could train to protect and provide for my family. And what happens is it just evolves over time. So protecting at the baseline is fitness. You can't grapple or use a firearm or any other things if you don't have the fitness to support it. So I work out so I could run, jump, climb, lift. And I work out so I can go do what I just did 5 minutes ago, an hour ago, which is playing baseball, because I want to be able to provide experiences to my kids and to others. I never want to say no to my kids. I want to just be able to go do the thing. And to your point about mental health, I also train to provide financially. And I believe that if I hit the mats, if I hit the gym, I show up better at work. And if I'm showing up better at work, chances are I'll be able to make more money, which will allow me to provide more financially for the family. So what happens is over time, you just have seasons, and those seasons evolve and change. Maybe right now you're trying to be a pro grappler. Maybe afterwards, you're just trying to look at grappling as an outlet to enhance your life. And I think being real with why you need to train, I think is the key. And for me, it's train so I can protect and I can provide.
Very well said, man. I love it. And that's such a good reason why, to bring it back home at the end of the day.
That's it. It'll never get old.
Well, dude, we already talked a little bit about your app, but is there anything else that you want to promote, or do you want to talk a little bit more about your app and how it could help people? Like, tell us more about what you got going on.
Yeah, I think our newsletter, if you go to th as in trainhard.fit, th.fit, and if you sign up for the newsletter, every week I just put out great content, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm biased. I also think that just stay tuned and follow trainhard.fit or Jason Khalipa on Instagram. We have some new programs coming out that I think are going to be really, really good for grapplers. And I'm fired up about it. It's been a long time coming. But yeah, stay tuned on there.
Heck yeah, man. Well, I'll put a link down below to your app, to the newsletter, and everything else you got going on. So if you're watching or listening to this, go check it out. And Jason, dude, thanks so much for coming on the show. This was a blast.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, man. I learned a lot. Thank you.